Hello, I'm Brownfield anchor reporter Megan Grebner. Today we are with Christie Wiebbecke, plant breeder and North American soybean commercial development breeder at Bayer Crop Science for Asgrow. Today is pretty exciting. We get to talk a little bit about the pipeline in the genetics and how that seed makes it to your planter. So, Christie, thank you for taking some time to chat with us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Megan. I'm excited to be here.
Let's start first and talk a little bit about Asgrow soybeans. And we talk about exclusive genetics. What does that really mean?
Really, when I think about exclusive genetics, I think about Asgrow seed being only sold in an Asgrow bag. So it's the only place you're going to find that genetics. And that genetics is really built on a huge foundation of awesome breeders and history throughout Bayer. Some of those genetics started off before Roundup Ready days as conventional varieties that we kept evolving over time and adding new biotech traits like Roundup Ready 2 Yield, Roundup Ready Extend, and now the latest and greatest Roundup Ready Extend Flex. So all of them build on each other, and I think that's the exciting thing about talking about Asgrow genetics and their exclusiveness.
The breeding history is fantastic. Talk to me a little bit about how you mentioned that they continue to build on each other with each new variety and each new trait launch. Talk to me a little bit about how it's grown and maybe a little bit too about some of the things you're focusing on and talking to growers to make sure those next generation varieties have.
I think that one of the really cool things is as a breeder is learning from breeders who've done this far longer than I ever have. Some of my colleagues have been in the business breeding crops for 40 years. And so the amount of knowledge that they have when you think about their germplasm knowledge, their ability to see things and connect environments to germplasm are unique in ways that it takes a career to build those connections. When I think about the history of soybean breeding at Bayer, we really try to look at the genetics that we have and build on it every generation. So we take two parents that are the most elite parents that we possibly have, and we say, for a given environment that a grower is in, I'm in Iowa, so I'm thinking about what Iowa needs as a soybean grower, and I think, okay, they need yield, they need standability, they need some kind of agronomic package, usually SDS, white mold, SCN, and then they're going to need that flexibility of herbicides. So I'm going to pick two parents that are going to have the best of both worlds, and I'm going to use those genetics, and I'm going to say, I want this one to have all of these characteristics and I want this one to have all of the other characteristics, bring them together and select them through utilizing chipping and genetic information to identify the individuals within those populations that are going to improve the overall. And then we do that year over year over year. And that's why it's truly a building process over time.
These genetics and this pipeline process isn't an overnight thing. It's not a 1 to 2 year thing. Talk to me a little bit about how the time frame also, but then how the breeding team for Asgrow can advance and continue to bring these new exclusive genetics to the market, which help promote higher yield potential as well.
Yeah, I think the time thing is definitely a big part of what we consider when we talk about breeding. It's the element that we deal with when we're talking about cycles. So we have to think of different ways to leverage time in our favor and use it to work with us. So we look at things like seed chipping and we look at things like protected culture so that we can break apart the season that we plant in with the cycle time of breeding. So by using protected culture, we can speed up that cycle time and recycle those parents faster in the process, driving that genetic engine and driving the yield levels higher, especially as we move through the trait transitions. So when we incorporate a new trait, we have to make sure that we're maintaining all of those agronomics, as well as bringing in that new herbicide tolerance that's really going to give that grower the flexibility that they need on their farm. We work very closely with our commercial counterparts to understand the needs of the customers And I think that's one of my favorite things, is going out and talking to dealers and growers and really understanding what are the challenges that they have on their farm, so that we know, looking into the future, not 1 to 2 years out, like you said, looking 5 to 10 years out, what are the challenges they may be facing, that we need to be thinking of innovative ways to look at our varieties, ways to connect those and combine those parents and those genetics. How do we test those varieties in local environments to make sure that we're meeting those growers' needs 5 to 7 to 10 years down the road?
My next question was, what conversations do you have with growers? What do they tell you when they want to, when you say, I want to see, what traits do you want to see? What are you looking for in seeds that you want to plant on your farm? What are those conversations like?
Um, I it's evolved throughout my career, and I think in the beginning I would go to dealer meetings and talk with farmers, and they would talk about corn for 3 hours. Yay, corn's king, right? And then they'd get to soybeans, and here I come up and I'm all fired up talking about soybeans. And we would talk about one thing. Typically, we would talk about yield of the soybeans, and we would keep it really simple. We would say, okay, what's the highest yielding group 3 bean that you have coming out? And really, that's only one piece to the puzzle. And I think over my career, I've seen that conversation evolve into really understanding that growers' unique needs, what they need on their farm, what challenges they need on their farm, and really developing tailored solutions and recommending tailored solutions and products for their farm. So it's two things in my head when I think about yield. I think about maximizing that yield potential. So if we manage that product really effectively and put it on the right acres and on the right soil type, and understand the risks that that grower has, we can help to give them the highest potential to maximize that yield potential. So it's really understanding the unique conditions, that they have challenges with frog eye in the south, that they're dealing with root knot nematode in the south. And so we want to make sure that the varieties have all of those high risk characteristics, or that there's a way to manage them with other applications of fungicide, or that we're doing crop rotation. There's lots of tools in the farmer's toolbox, and it's really layering all of those pieces of information together to give them the best recommendation unique to their farm. So I think that's the funnest part, is trying to understand that one-to-one relationship to give them the best recommendation possible.
Christy, that gets us to a pretty exciting topic for you, which would be the Asgrow Extend Flex soybeans. Talk to me a little bit about those beans and what makes this such a great option for growers.
I think when I think about Extend Flex, it's really the flex part of the label that makes them unique and special. I think it's that offering of having that additional tool in your toolbox, like I said before. So those varieties are going to be tolerant to using Roundup Ready herbicides. They're also going to be tolerant to using XtendiMax herbicides. And then all of a sudden now we have the additional flexibility of being able to utilize glufosinate. So if you have a tough planting season, like we've had a couple of years in a row, where you can't get planted on time, and you're dealing with wet conditions when you want to go out and spray your second application over the top, or just trying to figure out how to manage those tough to control weeds, those Asgrow XtendFlex beans have that additional layer of chemistry protection that are going to give you the flexibility. The important thing when you think about those varieties is still having those conversations to say, what agronomics do I need to be able to pick out of all of those varieties that Asgrow has to offer, which one's going to work best on your unique farm?
Christy, if folks want to find out more information about Asgrow Extenflex soybeans, what's the best place for them to go?
I would recommend contacting their local dealer or reaching out to a local agronomist. The agronomists that we have on Asgrow are experts in their field, and they're really going to know and have the connections to breeders like me in their local geography to get more information if they need support. We have awesome product managers, but that first step is to look to your dealer or an agronomist in your area.
Thank you for taking us a little bit behind the scenes and talking us about how these products go from the pipeline and then make it into our planter.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was great to chat with you today.
Thank you, Christy. I'm Megan Grebner for Brownfield.